Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Hardware Podcast. My name is Jackson Danner, alongside my good friend and best man Omar Borja. Today we are going to be previewing. It's hard to say, but week 11 of college football. So if you're into midweek action, it has already started, but we're going to focus a lot on Saturdays and talk about some of our favorite players from last week. So Omar, how are you doing, man?
Doing great. Glad to be doing this. Yeah, I just can't wait to get this conversation started. Jeez.
For reference, Omar's being a good sport and recording at like 4 in the morning local time and 6 a.m. local time here, but I have no struggles compared to Omar with that. So
Yeah.
yeah, man. Excited to this is I it's been a minute since we've had this much doubt in both the Heisman race and the college football playoff race at this point in November. And with the matchups that we have this weekend, I don't necessarily think a lot's going to get cleared up either. I think some teams have to lose to make it clear. I was listening to another podcast where it's like one scenario of, Texas could win out, but like if you have an undefeated Oregon and then an undefeated Georgia, an undefeated Florida State, and an undefeated Ohio State or Michigan, like Texas is left out of that playoff picture. So it's just like it's been a minute since we've had all Power Five potential champions be well in play in the college football race. Because I think if any of those teams drop a game, it's going to be Texas going in, presuming that they win out. So and that's a big if because I mean it's Texas. They have to go on the road to TCU. Have to play Texas Tech, who they lost to last year. Have to go on the road to Ames have to go on the road to Ames, and they'd also potentially play Ollie Gordon, who is right now looking like the best player in college football. So, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Omar, do you want to start us off with your offensive player of the week from last week?
Yeah, for me it's an easy pick. I gotta go with Bryson Daly for Army. I mean, 36 carries, 175 yards. This performance was just like a true throwback to like the days of old. 36 carries at quarterback. I mean, if you look at it, it just seemed like watching with my roommate, watching the Army Air Force game, my roommate, he's like saying he's the only one running the ball. Like he said something to that degree watching Army Air Force with me in our living room. But if you look at those stats, like really, he carried the ground game. Like no other player on Army had more than 9 carries. I mean, like Bryson Daly set the tone early with the 62-yard touchdown run for Army's first win for over an AP ranked team since 1972, since before Watergate. Took care of the ball, unlike Zach Larrier, really, and that's really all that mattered because Air Force had 6 turnovers. Army did not, and Daly, was effective when he needed to be, and tough as he's. I think he's the toughest quarterback in the country. Like no bias. Like I think there's. I don't know if you've seen that clip of him like absolutely like lowering the boom on that Syracuse D back slash linebacker, but plays like that define Bryson Day. Excuse me, Bryson Daly. So that's my offensive player of the week. I mean, no bias, but if it was like, I mean, a close second for me is Xavier Arline of Navy, who had 30 carries for 97 yards. So it's just a great week for gritty option quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think you can consider I would definitely consider Army being a bigger upset over Air Force than like Oklahoma State over Oklahoma or any of the other smaller upsets that we had this past week. So yeah, and I know technically neutral site. The game was in Denver, which for reference is like an hour away from Colorado Springs. So that was not a neutral site game. So yeah, that was a great win by Army, even I will admit. So I am going to go with my offensive player of the week, Phil Maffa, the running back from Clemson. 36 rushes for 186 yards and 2 touchdowns. 36 attempts is 20 more than his next highest volume game, which was the previous week. He also had his second straight week with 2 touchdowns. Clemson has not really figured out an identity as a team nor on as an offense yet. And we've seen another team find their identity through a running back midseason with Oklahoma State and Ollie Gordon. Oklahoma State is been 2-2 when he has less than 20 carries, undefeated when he has at least 20 carries. If Phil Maffa somehow can take on the identity of this Clemson offense until Cade Klubnik really figures out his place, um, that honestly could be Clemson's solution to not being back to their days of old, but just having a respectable, 8-4 year possibly for the rest of the season. So I'm not comparing Phil Maffa to Ollie Gordon, but I am saying that if Clemson can find Maffa's newfound production as their identity and keep it consistently, it's a very strong possibility that they can win out and be something that when if Clemson gets back to where they were, they don't look back on the 2023 season as that one horrible year.
Yeah, it's always interesting how I wrote about this a little bit last week how like Clemson Notre Dame was it's been must see TV, right? It's kind of interesting how like those teams tend to beat each other in upsets, and well, I guess the last couple years, last 2 years at least, and those have kind of salvaged the season. Like last year, Notre Dame beat Clemson in prime time, ruined Clemson's upset or playoff hopes, essentially. This year, no playoff was at stake, but Notre Dame was still playing for potentially New Year's Six hopes, and then Clemson upset them at home. So it's just an interesting trend, and Phil Maffa filled in admirably for Will Shipley. They're gonna have like Shipley's still. I think he's a junior this year. I think he's a junior this year, so they're gonna have a stacked backfield next year with both of them if they stay. If Shipley stays, which I believe he will.
Yeah, but yeah, no one's happier than Tyler from Spartanburg about this win. But yeah.
Dang, yeah, that's crazy. That's just funny. Honestly, the whole thing. I don't think Dabo handled that right. You want to not really as a coach kind of like not really worry about that. But hey, I
But
guess I guess
what
I got
surprised me about that whole thing, and just look up Tyler from Spartanburg if you're lost right now. What surprised me the most about that whole fiasco was how long Dabo entertained Tyler from Spartanburg and allowed him
yes.
to rant for it felt like over 60 seconds. It was probably something of the sort. It was a long time that he was talking uninterrupted. And finally Dabo was like, okay, yeah, like, are we done? Like, and then he addressed it all. That was the whole, college football, man. That's what makes it fun.
Yeah, no, exactly. So hopefully he's happy, but I don't know. I'd watch out for Georgia Tech this week. That's
Can
actually
you imagine? Oh my gosh. Oh my.
Georgia Tech's having
Georgia Tech
a good
is
year.
not, yeah,
Haynes
they're not
King, man.
having,
Haynes King is, having a great year at quarterback, and they're beating some good teams.
they are.
Um, they
Miami
may need
not
that.
being one of them, but they've beaten some other good teams.
Yeah, exactly. North Carolina being one of them,
Yeah.
So yeah, exactly. I know you had to throw in a Miami shot in there. But yeah, for my defensive player of the week, I'm gonna go with Brendan Bell out of Villanova. The CAA is a mess right now. There's I think 4 or 5 one-loss teams. Elon just beat Delaware. Elon posted a picture of a blue chicken on a rotisserie after beating Delaware, which was hilarious. But for the CAA for Villanova, Brendan Bell had 12 tackles and an interception in number 17 in the FCS stats poll. Virginia's win at New Hampshire. So the playoff mix is interesting. I'm sure that there will be one team at CAA that'll be left out. I don't think they're going to include every single team in that glut of teams. Like because there's some teams like Richmond that struggled in non-conference play, particularly losing to Oregon State. But just a great game from Bell for Villanova, and it'll be interesting to see how the playoff picture shapes up because Selection Sunday is only 11 days away. So we'll have to see when those matchups do shape up.
Yeah, absolutely. Villanova has, like you said, not the richest football history, right? And they're really what's the record this year again? I can't remember.
I gotta check. So I think Villanova only has I think
No, they're
one.
they're 7-2. Yeah, and winning 4 in a row. That's right. 5-1 in conference play. So only dropped one
Yeah, just remember that
But yeah.
FBS games can't be held against you. So in the field's eyes, because they lost to UCF, they're 7-1 right now.
Okay, gotcha. That
So
yeah,
yeah,
that's oh, so they okay, gotcha.
to the
Um,
committee's eyes, they're 7-1. If they would have beat UCF, then they would be 8-1. So,
yeah,
but yeah,
yeah. And when you remember when Google vanilla, oh my gosh,
that's
Villanova
funny.
schedule, have to put a football in there because with basketball season starting up this past week, have to remember that. So, and they've
Exactly.
really the only challenge that they've got really left is at Delaware, right? Because they've gone through, I feel like the gauntlet of the rest of their schedule. So
Yeah, I mean, could that be one of the last battles of the blue with Delaware, just with the riders in Delaware complaining about their situation in the CAA, which is absolutely horse hockey. Um, you don't disrespect your conference mates like that. I've really grown impatient with Delaware, because who are they to say that Bryant's not on the level? Who are they to say that Hampton and NCA&T are on their level? So just thought I'd put a note there. There's a lot of tension with conference realignment rumors in Delaware. So you might see Delaware be a
yeah.
Conference USA team soon, which I don't think that's fun for the fans, because
No,
there
no,
are
that
there
would
are
not
decades
be
of
that would not be
heritage.
at all.
There's
I'm not
decades of
gonna
heritage.
pretend that I know CAA football like you, but even I know that that would not be fun. So
Well, it's just because like they've been in they've had a lot of those conference mates, like not like the newer conference mates, of course, but like, they've been playing William and Mary, Rhode Island, Maine, New Hampshire, Villanova, Richmond for decades since they were in the Yankee conference together, back in the day. So I mean, if these fans want to go to New Mexico State, which I'm not insulting New Mexico State, but it's hard for fans to get excited about games like that. Suit yourself. They'd rather play New Mexico State than HBCU. I don't know what to tell you, Blue Hens fans. So
I just want if we get that, I just want a Delaware at Michigan game. I think that would be very confusing to the public. So
yeah, yeah, it would
um
be.
for my defensive player of the week, Omar, I did text you earlier that you would be shocked at it, and apparently not because you guessed the player right away. Bo Nicholas Paul, the corner from
Exactly.
Army.
Yeah, exactly.
Two interceptions on four targets, which is just an insane stat line. The only like remote flaw that Bo had of the game was like I think like three penalties, but he's had like four on the year, so that's not really something that is like a concern. It's just like literally the only thing that you can remotely say he did not do perfectly in this game. So Bo had a hell of a game. He's had a consistent year too. On the year, only 17 targets thrown his way, allowed 10 receptions for 113 yards, only 21 yards after a catch on the year, and then one touchdown, three interceptions. So Omar, the best stats for a corner are no stats. That's about as close as you get. He also had of note the first pick six for an Army player since 2020 this year too, which is cool. So probably the closest thing that Army has to an NFL talent right now, and would love to see him hopefully get a fair shot at the next level. So
Wow, so it's 2020. I gotta remember if what game that was, and if I was at that game, 2020. I'm trying to think. I gotta think. Oh,
so
I
it
know,
was it
I
was
know.
against
John
ULM this year.
Radigan, John Radigan, yep, John Radigan, ULM, right? First game,
ULM this year. I'm not sure about the 2020.
yeah, the 2021 was John Radigan against Middle Tennessee, I think.
Oh,
So
really?
I'll have to
Okay.
verify that because yeah, now it's coming back to me. So it's interesting you mentioned that.
Where's our intern? Where's our fact checker that can get that?
Yeah, we don't have a bear in the budget, so
Yeah, no, we do not. No, we do
we don't
not.
have the bear with us. But I mean I know it was John Radigan. I just forget if it was ULM or if it was against Middle Tennessee. But I guess moving on to HBCU.
I think Bo also had an interception on a fake punt, which is just a fascinating way to get one.
That is interesting. Yeah. Yeah,
I could
that's
be
pretty,
wrong
yeah.
about that. I'm pulling from my memory. Um, but yeah, you want
But
to go with your defensive player of the week?
yeah, so well, I mean, I'm on to HBCU players of the week. Um, so I know we talked earlier, so I changed mine. I think the unanimous HBCU player of the week for sure out of South Carolina State was excuse me, geez. Out of South Carolina State was Jawarn Howell of out of Spartanburg, or sorry, I think it's Orangeburg. Yeah, Orangeburg, South Carolina. Which that game, honestly, so the MEAC might be a mess too. Like, I mean, I don't think so. I don't think that North Carolina Central is going to lose a conference game the whole way. We'll see against Howard's probably their best like chance to lose one. But things can get chaotic in the MEAC if Howard beats North Carolina Central because we could have a couple or three, I haven't done the count yet, but multiple one-loss teams in conference. But that's just the 5 games for the MEAC season. Jawarn Howell, though, I'll let you talk about Jawarn Howell. If you had stats, but I mean, he had over 260 yards. I mean, South Carolina State only had 19 passing yards. Corey Fields, the seasoned veteran for South Carolina State, had went 3 for 11 for 19 yards in a win over Howard. But I want to spotlight another running back. I want to spotlight Elijah Burris. And Elijah Burris, I highlighted him earlier this year as a HBCU Player of the Week. This he's a stick of dynamite. I don't know what better way to describe him other than being a stick of dynamite. 14 carries, 173 yards against Maine as Hampton beat Maine 42 to 35. And in their second year in CAA, Hampton's having a respectable year. They're 5-4 right now. They won't make the playoffs. They're 3-3 in the CAA. They've tripped up against the CAA's better teams, but it's like they're doing what you would expect a solid CAA team to do. I mean, that conference has 15 teams, right? Like, and it's a shame that there's no bowls in that there's no bowl games in the football bowl sub or football championship subdivision because I mean for teams like Hampton that are 5-4 in their second year in a new conference, that's a season you can be proud of. You go 6-5, heck, you even go 7-4, which if they do go 7-4, then they might be in the conversation for the playoff. But Elijah Burris this year, I mean, in this performance with for 14 carries for 173 yards, this isn't even the first time that he's had an explosive performance like that. He's had a couple games where he's averaged over 8 yards a carry and had over 100 yards. So honestly, just a great explosive back and just a great year for running backs for Black College football running backs in general. Jada Byers continuing to have a great year. He had 27 carries for 155 yards this week for Virginia Union. And then I'll let you talk about Jawarn Howell, who in your words was excuse me, I think the obvious choice for HBCU Player of the Week.
Well, yeah, when you have 27 rushes for 283 yards, sorry, Falcons fans, and 3 touchdowns, yeah, it's hard to dispute that, in my opinion. So, I think if you ask anyone, pop quiz, who is the HBCU Player of the Week, I think Jawarn Howe would hopefully be the answer. So, just I don't have much to say, just an unheard stat line. You pretty much said it all. So, and you have to remember that he did this against the same Howard team that only lost to Northwestern by 3 and shut Delaware State out. Like, this is not a nothing defense. Howard is probably one of the better HBCU defenses. So for him to just have a Ray Davis-esque game on this Howard defense, man, just that
Yes.
is impressive.
Wow, I'm glad you were the one to mention Ray Davis this week, man. Sweet baby Ray Davis.
I have
That's
to.
that's great.
I'm trying to smile through the pain, Omar.
That's growth, man. That's like who is it for me? That's like I guess that's like mentioning Malik Nabers for me, or literally anybody in that LSU offense, which we didn't have a chance to. Oh, okay, no, that's actually mentioned like Thomas Castellanos for Boston College. That man will haunt my dreams. Because yeah, but anyway, yeah, just a great week for Black College football running backs, and I mean, there's been some great running back prospects in the past like few seasons, like John Martin out of the Orlando Guardians, playing for the Orlando Guardians out of North Carolina A&T. I mean, a lot or Ezra Gray out of Alabama State. So, just great running back prospects. Alfonso Graham too out of Morgan State too. So just the I guess the Black College football is rich with great running back talent, and it's just great to see Darius Higgins too. I mean, so the list goes on and on and on and on, and I'm excited. This year's crop, the coming crop of HBC running backs is no different. So going on to the Heisman race, I mean, I talked about a little bit before about how like you can only talk about JJ McCarthy, Michael Penix, and Bo Nix so much. So we're gonna take like a different route, and I think this is the route that most people are talking about. Like my friend Bobby of the TNT College Football Excuse me, sorry, had to clear my throat. But yeah, he said, I think it's time we start talking about Ollie Gordon in the Heisman race. Which for weeks we've been saying that Jawar Jordan was the front runner if for running backs for the Heisman, Jawar Jordan and Audric Esme earlier in the year. But Ollie Gordon has the stats. He has a big win. He's on a team that could win their conference, and he's on a team. If he puts up good enough stats, he's on a team that is good enough to I guess help him win the Heisman. Because for me, his team is reminiscent of 2016 Louisville, where like Louisville went 9-3 that year. But because Lamar Jackson was doing things that we had never seen on a college football field, he won the Heisman, even though Louisville was at best and ended up that year being a Citrus Bowl team. So same kind of thing for Oklahoma State. They're destined for like the Alamo Bowl. But I mean, if they already beat Oklahoma, I think I don't know if they played Texas in the regular season, but I think they did lose to Texas, right? Early in the regular season, Jackson.
I
Or
believe so. Let
no,
me
they
see.
actually did not play Texas. This Big Ten schedule or this
Oh,
Big
that's
12
right.
schedule is
That's right.
wild.
That
Yeah, so
I do remember that. There was a whole thing about that in the beginning. I remember listening to.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
the
crazy.
only the obviously the South Alabama loss that we've mentioned like 15 times on
Yes.
the show, and then who was their other one again? It was early in the season. I remember Iowa State. That's right. It was in Ames, but yeah,
It's pretty crazy. I mean, honestly, like their
yeah,
season, but they are for I mean they control their destiny in the Big 12. Like they can win the Big 12, and
yep,
I think
they
that'll
do.
help his Heisman campaign. So your thoughts on Ollie Gordon, like where he stands in this race, because it's a quarterback award, as we all know, but he's had some amazing performances lately.
Yeah, really my only concern or my main concern, I guess, for Ollie Gordon Heisman candidacy is that and it's not to say that he didn't have the game he needed to be talked about against Oklahoma. It's just that the remainder of his schedule is UCF, Houston, and BYU, which is not exactly going to attract the masses watching on television. So for a running back Heisman to work, I think you have to be on a championship level team, which Oklahoma State has improved a lot midseason. I don't know if they're that. Obviously, I think they'll go to the Big 12 championship, but I think really where he would win it would have to be the Texas Big 12 championship. That's really the only option. And if I think for that to work, it has to be like Oklahoma State is keeping like Ollie Gordon would have to win that game, and that game that they would win would have to keep Texas definitively and undoubtedly out of the college football playoff. And they need some help in the other Power Five conferences to do that. That's I think Ollie Gordon, like definitely if you ask me like who are the best three players in college football this year, I would honestly say Ollie Gordon would be in there. It's just a matter of if he can have the exposure and the spoiling of teams elsewhere. So and that none of that unfortunately is under Ollie's control. So keep doing what he's doing, that UCF, Houston, and BYU, and then just hope that like, okay, maybe Oregon drops one, maybe Florida State loses in the swamp, something like that, where like if Texas wins, they are in when they play in Dallas or in Fort Worth. And then Ollie Gordon just spoils the day, runs for almost 300 yards and keeps Texas out of the playoff. So that's really the only logical path I can think of because non-quarterback Heisman winners typically come from championship teams.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the remaining schedule, and like I mean I'm only looking at UCF right now. Like there's potential because he's playing like the Big 12's bottom teams that like he can have some really big games. Like UCF, like the only teams that seeing that they did not allow a 100-yard rusher were Villanova, Kent State, and Oklahoma. I mean, running backs have had some big days. I mean, Devin Neal had 12 carries, 154 yards for Kansas State when they played UCF. it was DJ Giddens who had 207 yards and 30 carries. So I mean, honestly, with the way he's played, like 200 yards in each of those games is realistic, bringing him up to like 1,800, 1,900 yards. But you are right though, like championship teams, like running backs tend to be on championship teams, which is why like Kenneth Walker was essentially booted from the race when they lost Ohio State by so badly, and it was not his fault. Like I think only had 6 carries that game, but their pass defense, like I've mentioned multiple times, like their pass defense was so bad that it kept Kenneth Walker out of the Heisman race. So that is a great point. But I mean, yeah, Ollie Gordon for sure. I mean, I don't think the Heisman race is as much of in a vacuum because Michael Penix did a lot for himself this past week against USC, outdueling Caleb Williams. So, but it is a name to consider. I think he does deserve to be in New York.
Sorry, there we go. It took me a minute to navigate back to Zoom. I apologize about that. Um, yeah, no, I do think he does deserve a trip to New York. It's just a matter, like I said, of having the exposure and the resume to go there. So, and you have to, if you're a running back that wins the Heisman, or if you're a non-quarterback, you have to affect the landscape of college football. Only way to do it. Only way to do it, unfortunately. So, we can move on to our games of the week
Oh,
for.
actually, no, we did have one more topic beforehand. I know we talked a little bit about Malik Nabers versus Marvin Harrison Jr. As in, like, are we talking about the wrong wide receiver? And if you look at every metric, like Nabers is better than Marvin Harrison Jr. has better stats than Marvin Harrison Jr. I should say. I mean, Nabers has 66 catches for over 1,000 yards. He's got 10 touchdowns like Harrison does. I think Harrison only has around 55 catches for like 900 yards. So I mean, your thoughts on this because something that could help. I know LSU has 3 losses, right? But something that helps Neighbors' case, in my opinion, is the fact that LSU has such a strong pedigree of receivers. So, like when you think about LSU receivers, you think Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, right? So I mean, Neighbors is falling into that row like very, very nicely. So I mean, I want to know your thoughts. Is it the same thing with Ollie Gordon being like not being on a championship team?
No, I think that I don't want to fall for just stat lines when you play, especially for receivers, because there's not as I think stat lines are more a fair assessment of running backs, obviously, and in that case, Ollie Gordon is just fine. But I think that the best receivers don't always have the best stat lines. Of course, it's a hard topic because I'm not gonna say that like you can just I'm I'm not gonna say that you can have, bad stats and be an elite receiver because you really can't. You have to be able to affect the game, but there's other ways to affect the game than just pass catching as a receiver, whether that's attracting attention on routes, whatever it is, and opening it up for others. I think MHJ has been like doing those as from what I've seen as much as he can, especially with their quarterback situation. And really, like, they lost CJ Stroud, and we all know how he's playing. So for considering his situation, I think he's playing about as good as you can ask. And I don't know. I definitely don't think we're talking about the wrong receiver. It's just maybe we can bring someone else into it. So I don't know. I'd like to watch a little bit more of both of them. Honestly, if I'm being honest. So
Yeah, I mean, Neighbors, it's hard to beat his performance against Alabama, 10 for
yeah.
171. I mean, but just something I thought I'd bring up because I know everyone's talking about like I saw the argument on Twitter actually, not someone that I interact with commonly, but it was something that was like it's like one of these guys is a Heisman front runner with quotes, and the other one is not receiving attention. And of course, we're talking about Malik Neighbors, who's having an amazing year. That is true. That is a good point too. But it's like I think it's like with Ohio State, with the amount of weapons they have. I mean, they have one of the best tight ends in the country. They have, of course, Emeka Egbuka, a great receiver in his own right, which, it's kind of it's reminiscent of the duo of Garrett Wilson and Jackson Smith and Jigba, right?
Right. Right.
Um
Yeah.
so, it's a good point for sure. But I mean, as it stands right now, like I want to say with either with either of those players, I think the thing that'll close on before we go to our games of the week is like Michigan would be just fine without JJ McCarthy, right? I
Yeah.
don't think Oklahoma
Yeah, I
State would be the
agree.
same way. And all due respect to Alan Bowman, really having a good year at quarterback, but Ollie Gordon, man, like he is like the centerpiece of that offense.
You
So
take Mike Penix out of Washington or Ollie Gordon out of Oklahoma State, and there's not two college football teams that are worse without that one player.
yeah, I'd have to agree. I would have to agree. So yeah, so I guess let's go to our games. Lee Jackson, you can go first.
Yeah. So for my first game of the week, I'm gonna go with one of the more obvious ones, but I just want to have some talking points I want to go over. Michigan at Penn State. I want to talk a little bit about the obvious with Michigan. There's obvious in the world of college football, and then there's like one of the front pages of the Wall Street Journal, which they were this week. Michigan right now, honestly, is on the forefront of the college football world, and it's not for a good reason. At some point, the controversy of these really no longer alleged misconducts have to evoke some kind of emotional reaction of some kind, right? You can only go so long without it letting affect your play. The thing about Michigan, statistically, I know they have like the best scoring and passing defense in the country. They haven't really had the opportunity to undertake a challenge like Penn State, much less on the road. I think there actually is an argument that UNLV at home is probably their most impressive win, just with the year that UNLV is having. Um, and then within that same circle of logic, there's they can only beat who they play, right? So I think there's two more caveats that I want to add, and we won't know which is more applicable until late Saturday afternoon. Michigan has beaten the teams that they've played like they should beat them if they're elite, or they haven't been in a fist fight yet. They haven't played anyone of their own same level. Makes sense why they beat all those other teams and couldn't win this one. So again, we won't know. We won't know until Saturday afternoon. It's just like I think we're gonna look back and, oh wow, a 34-point average margin of victory makes sense because they just played inferior teams and now they finally beat a good team. Or there goes Michigan's defeat because they had all the signs to most of those games in the beginning anyway, and this is the first good team they've played. So for Penn State, I mean, they are a top 15 passing defense and all that. Ohio State certainly exposed some of their weaknesses, and it was without a top Heisman candidate. So James Franklin is 3-16 against top 10 teams in this Penn State tenure, and 3-6 against Michigan. Man, if there was a time to capitalize on misfortune, it's this week, man. With all that Michigan has been going through, that this would be the time you would think to hopefully get that win that he has been trying for a long time to get. So and I can't speak for any potential apprehension that Penn State has against Michigan or Connor Stallions or anything, but after hearing Ryan Walters' comments, the Purdue head coach, don't you think there's a possibility of a strong animosity playing a part in the motivation of this game for Penn State? Like that coaches are petty creatures, and you have to find anything that you can to motivate your team, and sometimes just make stuff out of thin air. Just ask Lou Holtz. But man, don't you think like there's a possibility that that goes in? And this is kind of the first team that they've played, the first game since like really all of this has like kind of settled down where, okay, it's true. These are no longer just crazy things that we're, potentially making up, or coaches just, saying whatever. Like, no, this is like that. There's evidence, like, there's the potential of the Big Ten there's incoming punishment, right? So I don't know. That's just me, but I'm excited to see how both Penn State handles this controversy and how they handled probably the emotional toll that this has played a place in. And I'm excited to see, hey, like I said, if there's ever a time to take advantage of misfortune for Penn State and James Franklin, it's right now at home.
Yeah, exactly. I would agree. And like of course as well, the narrative as well behind Penn State, like where they can't beat Michigan, they can't beat Ohio State, they can beat everyone else, right? So that is a huge one too. I just want to note that Connor Stallions is a graduate of the Naval Academy. I don't know if that's important. I just want to mention that. Um, but um, but he's a true Michigan man. We'll say he's a true Michigan man. But yeah, like honestly, like, yeah, like the animosity and things for sure. Like, it's just interesting how it plays out, how the situation will play out. But I think more important, I think something that's been overshadowed, how there never been a sign stealing scandal. I think the more important thing would be the narrative behind Penn State and James Franklin, where it's like, it's the same thing every year, where like you lose to Ohio State, you lose to Michigan, but you win the rest, and you either go to like the Citrus Bowl if you lose another game past that, or you go to the New Year's Six. So it's just intriguing, honestly. And I mean, big noon kickoff, Michigan Penn State. Like, what more could you ask for? This is like a classic. I mean, not really classic because Penn State joined the Big Ten in the '90s, but it's a kind of like stereotypical November Big Ten big game. So I'm excited for that one. So I'm gonna go like the opposite direction, obviously, with my first game of the week. Um, so I'm gonna go with the Patriot League race, and something that was brought up to my attention by a friend on Twitter, Lehigh Football Nation at LFN. He has great commentary about the Patriot League, being a Lehigh fan. Of course, the Mountain Hawks are having a tough year at 2-7, but they will play a role in this. So the main game I want to showcase is Georgetown at Bucknell. Georgetown is 2-2 in the Patriot League, and they're 2-2 in the Patriot League and 4-5 overall. But they control their own. They don't. Sorry, there is a path to them making the playoff, and this is huge because Georgetown has never made the FCS playoffs. They've almost always been the laughing stock of the Patriot League, being a basketball school in particular, because everyone knows Georgetown's in the Big East in basketball, but I don't think many people can tell you where Big East or where Georgetown football resides. Georgetown's defense, nice voice crack, but Georgetown's defense allows 23 points per game. There's not really a main star surprising on this defense. Like, no player has more than 5.5 TFLs. No player has more. Their leading tackle has 50 tackles on the year. But this is a defense that gets the job done. They shut down a potent Fordham offense earlier this year and upset them. Probably one of the biggest upsets of the year and in the past couple years, if I want to be honest. On offense, though, they're led by Nicholas Dunneman, who has over 600 receiving yards. He had 15 catches for 205 yards against Colgate. The key thing to note for Georgetown is they own the tiebreaker over Fordham, the head-to-head tiebreaker over Fordham. So keep that in mind. Bucknell, though, I mean, some football is going to fly in the air because Ralph Ruckers had a great year for the Bison. He had 387 yards versus Colgate. He looks like Bucknell's quarterback of the future. And Bucknell is another team that's never made the playoffs for sure. But Bucknell, they spread the love around when they pass the ball. They have 4 receivers with 30 catches each. So, I mean, you won't find any groundbreaking, any game breaking receivers like MHJ or Malik Nabers, but they spread the love around for sure. Like they have defenses tied up because they have options to go to. So going on to the next thing, going to Fordham Lafayette. So for Georgetown to make the playoff, they need Fordham to beat Lafayette this week, and then Lafayette has to lose to Lehigh because they own the head-to-head tiebreaker over Fordham, and Fordham has 2 losses in conference as it is. Fordham, last year we talked about them a lot. Actually, the last 2 years we talked about them a lot because of Tim DeMorat, the Josh Allen of the B train. I'm hoping he finds his way into a spring football roster, honestly, because he's a great quarterback talent. Went to the Hula Bowl last year. This year's no different. CJ Montez transferred in. He has a 24-1 touchdown interception ratio. Absolutely staggering. He's going to get some Walter Payton votes for sure. And also another guy that's going to get Walter Payton votes is Julius Loffridge, who has 1,039 rush yards so far, 6 yards a carry. He had 106 yards versus Buffalo and 211 yards versus Holy Cross, which is a recurring theme in the Patriot League. Teams running all over Holy Cross. But great offense still for Fordham. Going on to Lafayette. Lafayette is the top team in the league. They beat Holy Cross. They have one conference loss to Colgate, and they just have great star power as well. Jamar Curtis has 963 rushing yards. He had 229 yards himself against Holy Cross in that game where everyone ran over everyone in that game because that's a game Matt Sluga had over 300 rushing yards. So if you had a football in your hand and played in the Holy Cross Lafayette game, there's a chance that you had 100 yards. And then on defense, Billy Schaefer's following in the footsteps of Malik Ham, who's on the Ravens now and was an NFLPA Collegiate Bowl alum. He has 19 and a half TFLs and 10 sacks. So, I mean, he's going to wreak some havoc for Lafayette on that Fordham pass protection and run game with Loffridge. And then finally Colgate Lehigh. I mean, Colgate needs to lose one other game for Georgetown to get their first playoff berth. Colgate has Trayvon Sanders, who has 54 catches for 651 yards, including 300-yard games, and Mike DiNucci stars for Lehigh with 74 tackles. But a lot happening in the Patriot League, and honestly, like if Georgetown makes the playoff, play the FCS playoffs, and it's going to be a landmark event because they've been waiting so long for this. A team I didn't mention, Holy Cross plays Army, and we've said before that FBS games can't count against you as an FCS school. So Patriot League chaos, gotta love it.
Absolutely, man. No, I'll admit I really didn't follow much of the Patriot League until the past couple years and all our talk with Matt Sluka and all that. And man, it is a fun league to keep track of. It really is. So, um, no, man, a lot going on in the FCS season, wrapping up very quickly. So, with my next game of the week to watch, I'm going to go with Texas State at Coastal Carolina. The first thing I want to know, Grayson McCall is doubtful with a head injury in this game, so good chance that we don't see him play. But I do want to talk. I want to throw it back to Bulls and Booze a little bit, where we go back to some hypothetical bowl scenarios for this one, right? So there's a very unique opportunity for both teams here that with James Madison's bowl ban, if it stands, despite the letter that James Madison sent, the winner has the chance to be the second best team in the Sun Belt final standings, even if they don't participate in the Sun Belt Championship. Now, there is no definitive pecking order for the Sun Belt Bowls, but it is based off of the best available time slots and the best matchups available, and it's all at the discretion of the Sun Belt commissioner. So I'm not saying that, they're going to some prestigious bowl that everyone in the Sun Belt looks after going to, but you do have the good possibility of having the second best bowl game, even if you don't go to the conference championship. That would be a particularly big deal for Texas State since they're bowl eligible for the first time in 9 years, and a Sun Belt championship is still in play for them. They're coming in hot with the second largest win in a Sun Belt game ever. They do have to travel on the road for the first time in over a month. For Coastal Carolina, first in the Sun Belt in turnover margin, just obviously have to play possibly without Grayson McCall, and that's an unknown, obviously, whenever you don't have the best quarterback in the Sun Belt. So excited to see how this one plays out and just how the Sun Belt final standings play out as we head into December.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I also want to note Jackson too. They said that Sunbelt went forward and said that if the NCAA does approve JMU's request, then they will let JMU play in the conference championship game, which could mean this game could have New Year's Six implications as well, just depending on how the NCAA rules. So a lot at stake with the NCAA, and like the NCAA, it's hard to see like what waivers they'll approve and which ones they won't, because last year around this time of year there was some chaos. Well, actually a couple weeks later from this date, there was some chaos with New Mexico State having lost the game due to San Jose State having the tragic death of one of their players occur the weekend of when they were supposed to play New Mexico State. They had a waiver to play a second FCS school because they tried to schedule an FBS school, and it got approved, and they ended up going bowling with a 6-6 record with 2 FCS wins. So the NCAA and how they approve their waivers is really interesting, and it's hard to predict. With that being said, so going on to my game, I'm gonna do a little primer like I did the last time, or with my last game with Georgetown Bucknell, and look and talk about the MEAC picture in the race for the Celebration Bowl, because that's just a great thing about the MEAC and SWAC is like there is just a huge pie in the sky reward for the teams playing in the MEAC, like where at the beginning of the season, in all likelihood, if you win the conference, you know where you're going. So I'm going to start off with Morgan State versus South Carolina State. South Carolina State inserted themselves after a week after getting embarrassed on national TV on a Thursday night. Davius Richard had 7 touchdowns for North Carolina Central. South Carolina State responded and they upset Howard during homecoming. I mean, they beat Howard during South Carolina State's homecoming, but I mean, this is just a game between, of course, 2 teams trying to keep their Celebration Bowl hopes alive, which if Morgan State can beat South Carolina State, then South Carolina State's eliminated, but they would need North Carolina Central to lose their last 2 games, which isn't likely to happen, but there is a chance, a small chance at that. Morgan State plays good defense. I mean, they came a yard away from beating UAlbany, a team, one of the better teams in the CAA, a team that had two that was competitive against Hawaii, competitive against Marshall, and has only I think one loss one FCS loss. Yeah, one FCS loss on the year and looks to keep it that way and is honestly I wouldn't say a shoe in for the playoffs, but that's a very strong case. They came a yard away from beating them. They beat Richmond, a team that right now, as we're talking, is 6-3 and has their own playoff argument for sure. So Morgan State is no pushover. I mean that is a strong team, and of course North Carolina Central. They shut down Davies Richard on Thursday night, held him to 16 of 30, 122 yards and a touchdown. A very human stat line for Richard. 11 carries for 29 yards. So that's the first game. Of course, we talked about Jawarn Howell and South Carolina State. I mean, should be a good game. Honestly, it should be, I think, a low scoring slugfest, a game that's dependent on the ground and whatnot, because we know Morgan State likes to run the ball. They run that pro style type scheme. Last year, Alfonso Graham had a lot of yards. This year, it's running back by committee. Um, but I mean, they still have focus on the run game. Then going on to North Carolina Central versus Howard, this is arguably the game of the year in the MEAC because I mean Howard and North Carolina Central were the two teams that shared the conference title last year. I mean Howard had one conference loss, as did North Carolina Central, right? So those teams shared it, and that was Howard's first share of a conference title since the 1990s. And this one, the quarterbacks are going to steal the headlines here because we got Quinn Williams, excuse me, 13. He has 13 touchdowns, 4 interceptions this year, and he's a candidate for not only the HBCU Legacy Bowl, but also the Hula, the Shrine Bowl, any All-Star game. I mean, he's a quarterback that I think can get onto a roster. He's got great size, 6'5", 205 pounds, which you're more the expert on what to look for in pro quarterbacks, Jackson. So I'll let you say more about that if you do have more to say. And then of course Davis Richard, who is honestly a Walter Payton Award candidate for North Carolina Central. If North Carolina Central wins, they shouldn't have any problem, winning the MEAC because they have Delaware State the next week. But if Howard wins, this could cause some chaos because we could have Howard beating North Carolina Central, and then South Carolina State could finish the season off with one loss, and they lost to North Carolina Central but beat Howard. So some crazy tiebreakers could come into play for the Celebration Bowl if that happens. So Morgan State, South Carolina State at 10 a.m. On ESPN Plus, and then Howard versus North Carolina Central is getting some ESPN U Shine for the MEAC at 3:30. So that'll be one that I'm gonna watch this week.
Hey, we love some MEAC football on ESPNU. So ESPNU with some like solid lineups lately. So don't sleep on ESPNU. Doesn't all have to be on ESPN Plus. So I'm going to go with my last game of the week to watch. We love the FCS, Omar. Yeah, I mean you're a voter. I don't have to tell you that. Anytime we think an FCS win over an FBS team is possible, especially in the case where it's likely, we got to talk about it. Got to mention our thoughts. So I do want to mention, man, give me Match Luca and the defending Patriot League champions on the road. Again, taking advantage of a team with an emotional victory last week and coming back traveling, practically across the country. So, man, excited to see Match Luca go against it. As long as you don't throw it, Bo, he's going to be fine, going to win the game. So I can't wait to see it.
So he might be a game time decision. Joe Pizanski, though, the backup for Holy Cross, has filled in admirably for sure. Pizanski's been great, but I will say that will be a factor. Jordan Fuller also runs the ball very well. Honestly, it'll be a hard fought game. It really will be. But Holy Cross has shown that like this isn't the same Holy Cross that's a threat to beat. I mean, they almost beat Boston College, but at the same time, like they lost to Lafayette, right? They lost to Harvard at home in their showcase game. So it will. I think it will be close. I really do think it will be close for sure. But I mean, Sluka's got to play. I mean, even though Pizanski, because that team's a different offense with Pizanski, because Pizanski doesn't have that groundbreaking running element to him that Sluka has. Because Matt Sluka is probably I'll go out on a limb and say he's the best running quarterback in the country. FBS, FCS, Division two, Division three, best running quarterback in the country. But going on to my last games to watch, I'm going to showcase a pair of historic Division three rivalries. We have the biggest little game in America, Williams versus Amherst. These two teams have been playing since 1884, and it's just it's just a tightly wound. It's just a tightly contested contest every single time. It always seems like it's hard fought too because like last year's game was a 20-10 kind of brawl. 2021's game was a 24-19 type of brawl. So, I mean, these two teams have been playing since 1884. In total, they've met 136 times. And I mean, I expect the same thing, low scoring fest, because both teams average around 15 points per game in the NESCAC, the New England Small College Athletic Conference, which those teams are known as the Little Ivies due to their academic prowess. So definitely great. Definitely a great time tested rivalry that I'll be talking about with our old friend of the podcast, Brendan Costa. So I contacted him this morning. I'll be talking to him about those rivalries. And then the other game I want to talk about is the Manon Bell out in Indiana between DePaul and Wabash. And this game has almost everything at stake, really, because DePaul right now, as it stands, DePaul right now is undefeated. They're 9-0 right now. They have one of the best defenses in the country, allowing 12 points per game. They average over 40 points per game on offense. These two teams, they're essentially playing for a playoff spot. Like, what more could you ask for in this time-tested rivalry? Another rivalry that debuted all the way back in 1890. This rivalry is well known. The Wabash College Little Giants and the DePaul University Tigers played for the Manon Bell. So everything's at stake, really, because in Division 3, I think it's a 32 or 36 team field, and if you add up all the conferences that are in Division 3, there's only space for 3 or 4 at large spots. So what more can you ask for? The final weekend of Division 3 football, playoffs at stake, time tested rivalries. I urge you to find the streams of those games and just check them out, because that's what makes college football great.
Absolutely, man. No, especially as the FCS season wraps up. A lot of good football to watch, a lot of good FBS power. Man, we've got pretty much every playoff race imaginable, and every race for anything is heating up. So as we're wrapping up, so that's about it for me, man. Anything else before we hop off?
No, I mean, just enjoy football. I also forgot to add that Pitt and Syracuse are playing at Yankee Stadium in honor of the 100th anniversary of football at Yankee Stadium. Football at Yankee Stadium is a rich tradition, and Syracuse will be playing for their bowl eligibility lives. But that's definitely one to watch for sure. I mean, Yankee Stadium. Too bad that's not on the CW. That game should be on the CW, in my opinion. But it's neither here nor there.
Absolutely. No, the CW, man, is going to be, when we look back, the CW is going to contribute to the fabric of the sport, as Reese David said, just like Raycom and Jefferson Pilot and all those, man. It really plays a part in the obscurity and the fun of it. So,
Yeah, it's network
yeah.
TV football for sure. It's football on a,
Yeah.
on a national network. But that's all I have to say as well, Jackson. Everyone just enjoy your week. And until next time, everyone, peace, love, and soul.